He wore my dog tags in my truck, on my porch, while I was crawling through Hell Week with her name in my mouth. Then her lawyer showed up with a smile and divorce papers, said she deserves half your SEAL bonus. I didn't punch him. I just nodded and took notes. For weeks, I played broken. Then, just before court, his office called back. Would your client be open to settling privately? The same man who smirked in my doorway was whispering through his secretary. They thought I'd snap. I recalibrated. But before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. My name is Eric Maddox, and I'm 33 years old. Every morning before dawn, I run these Coronado beaches until my lungs feel like fire, preparing for SEAL training. My wife Alyssa used to send warm letters filled with hope, but lately, her words read distant and rehearsed. I grew up fixing engines in Missouri, learning early that every problem has a solution if you study it long enough. When I finally earned my shot at the Navy, Alyssa cried and promised she'd wait, her fingers gripping my dog tags. The sweat drips down my neck as I push harder through each training session. But something about her last few messages feels wrong, mechanical, like an engine missing its timing. Most men see me as just muscle and grease under fingernails, but 15 years of precision mechanics taught me to spot patterns others miss. But let me start from the beginning. The transport touched down just after sunset. I shouldered my duffel, muscles still aching from the final week of training, and felt that surge of pride knowing I'd made it through. 15 years turning wrenches had given me the discipline, but SEAL training had forged something harder in me, something that could take a beating and keep moving forward. You know that feeling when you're working on an engine and something just sounds off? That first hint that the timing's wrong or there's a knock you can't quite place? That's what hit me the moment I walked through our front door. "Alyssa?" I called out, dropping my bag in the entryway. The house was dim, just a single lamp burning in the living room. The air felt different somehow, stale, like a garage that's been closed up too long. "In here," she answered from the kitchen. Her voice had that flat tone I remembered from her last few letters. I rounded the corner, and there she was, leaning against the counter with her arms crossed. My chest tightened. She looked different. Hair highlighted lighter than I remembered, styled in a way that seemed more office than the casual waves she used to wear. But it was her eyes that got me. They wouldn't quite meet mine. "Hey," I said, moving to hug her. She let me, but her arms stayed loose, barely touching my back, like hugging a mannequin. "Missed you." "You too," she mumbled into my shoulder, then pulled away quick. "There's leftover pasta if you're hungry." I stood there while she heated up a plate, taking in the kitchen. Something felt off. The photos that used to line the windowsill, gone. The vintage socket wrench said I'd mounted on the wall, a gift from my old boss, replaced by some generic art print. Even the drawers looked different, like they'd been reorganized. "Place looks different," I said carefully, watching her back as she worked the microwave. "Needed a change." She shrugged without turning around. "You were gone a while." We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the silence broken only by my fork against the plate. Back in training, I'd dreamed about this moment, coming home, telling her about surviving Hell Week, watching her face light up with pride. Now she just pushed her own food around, never asking a single question about what I'd been through. "How's work?" I tried. "Fine, busy." Another shrug. "New projects, you know how it is." I did know. She'd mentioned a big logistics contract in one of her early letters, but the details had gotten vaguer over time, just like everything else. After dinner, she said she had some emails to catch up on and disappeared into the spare room we'd converted to a home office. I stood in our bedroom, unpacking my duffel, trying to shake off the feeling that I'd walked into the wrong house. The dresser drawers had been rearranged too, my stuff pushed to the back, some of it missing entirely. When Alyssa finally came to bed, she slid under the covers on her side, the far side, without a word. I lay there in the dark, listening to her breathing, not quite asleep. That's when it hit me. The pillow. Her pillow. It carried a scent I didn't recognize, something woodsy and expensive. Not my standard issue deodorant, not the simple soap I'd used since basic. Cologne. Another man's cologne. My gut clenched the way it did before jumping into cold ocean water. Part of me wanted to roll over, shake her awake, demand answers. But 15 years of methodical mechanics work had taught me something. You don't tear into an engine without understanding the problem first. You watch, you listen, you gather evidence. So I lay there, perfectly still, letting that unfamiliar scent burn into my memory. Training had taught me to control my breathing, to master my reactions. I used every bit of that control now, because somewhere between my leaving and coming home, something fundamental had shifted. And like any good mechanic, or SEAL, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with before I made my next move. The next morning hit different. You know that feeling when you're working on an engine and something's off, but you can't pin it down yet? That raw instinct that makes the hair on your neck stand up? Yeah, that. I grabbed my keys, heading for the garage. The smell of old oil and rubber usually centered me, but when I hit the switch, my stomach dropped. The space where my '69 Mustang should have been sat empty, just bare concrete and a few old oil stains. That car was my pride. I'd rebuilt her from scratch, every weekend for 2 years straight, the kind of project that becomes part of you. And now, nothing. I found Alyssa in the kitchen, tapping away at her phone. "Where's the Mustang?" She barely glanced up. "Oh, it wasn't starting. Had to move it." "Move it where?" "Storage unit." She waved her hand vaguely. "You know how temperamental that thing is." "Temperamental? I'd tuned that engine to perfection before leaving." "Which storage unit?" "I'll have to look up the details." She stood, gathering her purse. "Running late for work. We can talk later." I watched her drive away, that gnawing feeling getting worse. The Mustang wasn't just a car, it was my benchmark. Every bolt, every wire placed with precision. If something was wrong with it, I'd know, and I sure as hell would have fixed it before letting anyone move it. Back inside, I started unpacking my gear in the office. The laptop sat open on the desk, a small blue light blinking on its side. USB drive, probably work stuff, but something made me click into the file explorer. And there they were, dozens of photos, all neatly dated. My hands went cold as I clicked through them. Alyssa, smiling wider than she had in years, and with her, some guy in pressed slacks and a polo shirt. They were everywhere. In my truck, on our front porch, in our living room. Then I saw it. The photo that turned my blood to ice. They were at some restaurant, his arm around her waist, around his neck, my dog tags, the ones I'd left with her for safekeeping. He wore them like a trophy, grinning straight at the camera. The timestamps told their own story. The first photos started just 2 weeks after I'd left for training. While I was pushing through Hell Week, crying her name in my head to keep going, she was... My fist clenched, but years of discipline kicked in. Deep breath, assess, plan. The rage wanted to explode, but I forced it down, let it crystallize into something colder, more focused. I heard her car pull up around 6. By then, I'd studied every photo, every date. I sat at the kitchen table, waiting. The front door opened. "Alyssa." She froze in the doorway, something in my voice making her pause. "What? Want to tell me about the photos?" Her face flickered. Surprise, then something harder. She set her purse down slowly. "You went through my things? Like he went through mine?" I kept my voice level. "Those are my tags he's wearing." She lifted her chin. At least he was here to wear them. I was training, becoming something better. For us. For you. She crossed her arms. "You left me here alone while you played soldier. I needed a real man, Eric. Someone who could give me the life I deserve." The words hit like body shots, but I didn't flinch. A real man? Who wears another man's tags for laughs? He makes 6 figures, has ambition beyond turning wrenches. Her laugh was sharp, dismissive. "Face it, you were never going to be enough." I stood up slowly. The rage was still there, but distant now, like watching waves through deep water. Without a word, I walked past her, out onto the porch. The evening air felt thick, heavy with things that couldn't be unsaid. Behind me, I heard her voice, hard with challenge. "What are you going to do about it?" I kept walking, because right then, I needed silence, needed to think. The pain would come later. Right now, my mind was already shifting, calculating, the way it did when facing an impossible task in training. The next morning hit like a hammer. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cold cup of coffee, when I heard something drop on the porch. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of a courier walking back to his van. My joints creaked as I stood up, still sore from training, or maybe just from sleeping on the couch. The manila envelope sat there like a landmine. No return address, just my name typed neat and clean. Professional. Clinical. The morning sun felt too bright as I picked it up. Heavy paper, expensive. The kind used by people who want their words to carry weight. Inside, the documents were crisp, each page a fresh punch to the gut. Divorce petition, asset division, alimony demands, and there, highlighted in yellow like a knife to the ribs, a claim on my seal signing bonus. The one I'd earned crawling through hell, the one meant to help us start fresh. Remember that feeling when your wrench slips and splits your knuckles wide open? That sudden shock before the pain hits? This was worse. Way worse. A car engine purred behind me, the kind of purr that costs more than most folks make in a year. I turned to see a silver Lexus ease up to my curb, all gleaming chrome and status. The man who stepped out looked like he'd just walked off a lawyer billboard. Tailored suit, silver-streaked hair slicked back, shoes that probably cost more than my first toolbox. Mr. Maddox? His smile was all teeth. Gregory Levitt. I represent Mrs. Maddox in this matter. He gestured at the papers in my hand. I see you've received our initial filing. I said nothing, just watched him climb my steps like he owned them. Look, he continued, adjusting his cuffs. We can make this simple, quick, clean. Each word dropped like oil on water. Mrs. Maddox is willing to be reasonable. For now. Reasonable. The word felt wrong in my mouth. She wants half my bonus. Money I haven't even earned yet. Gregory's smile widened. Consider it compensation for her sacrifices during your career transition. He made it sound like I'd been off playing games instead of training to serve. Of course, if you prefer to fight this, we can take it to court. Air everything out. Make it very public. The threat hung there, wrapped in expensive cologne and legal terminology. Your choice, Mr. Maddox. We can settle quickly, or Mrs. Maddox will have no choice but to pursue her full legal rights. He pulled out a business card, held it between two manicured fingers, including a detailed examination of your fitness for military service, given the emotional circumstances. My training kicked in, that iron discipline that kept you moving when everything screamed to stop. I took the card, kept my face neutral. Inside, gears were already turning, remembering details, calculating angles. Think it over, Gregory said, stepping back. But don't think too long. Offers have expiration dates. I watched him glide back to his Lexus, watched those taillights disappear around the corner. Then I sank onto the porch steps, papers crumpling in my grip. Everything I'd built, everything I'd fought for. It was all on the line now. My marriage, my savings, maybe even my place in the SEALs. Years of grinding away in the shop, pushing myself beyond limits in training, all of it hanging by a thread because I'd trusted the wrong person. I stared at the divorce papers until the words blurred. The morning breeze carried the scent of my neighbor's gardenias, the same ones Alyssa had wanted planted in our yard. Funny how memories stick to smells like that, how they can turn sweet things bitter. Footsteps approached. Mrs. Chen from next door, out for her morning walk. She slowed, probably seeing something in my face that made her worried. You okay, Eric? I managed a nod, tried to fold the papers casually. No need to air this laundry to the neighborhood. Not yet, anyway. Just some legal stuff to sort out. She hesitated, then continued on. I could feel her concern trailing behind like a shadow. Same concern I'd seen in the faces of guys who washed out of SEAL training, that look of someone watching another man's world crumble. But I wasn't crumbling, not yet. Maybe not at all. I sat there a long time, watching the sun climb higher, feeling the weight of those papers in my hands. Everything I'd worked for was suddenly balanced on a knife's edge. My future, my name, my dignity. The question wasn't whether I'd fight. The question was how. The sun had set by the time I went back inside. The house was empty. Alyssa had texted that she was staying with friends. Right. I pulled out my old logbook, the one I'd used to track maintenance records back in my mechanic days. Some habits die hard, and detailed note-taking was one I'd carried into SEAL training. My hand was steady as I wrote down everything about Gregory Levitt. His silver Lexus ES350, California plates ending in KRJ. The way his suit fit too perfect to be off the rack, probably Martin & Sons on Ocean Boulevard. I'd fixed the owner's Ferrari enough times to recognize their tailoring. The business card listed his office in one of those glass towers downtown, specializing in high-asset divorce settlements. You know what SEAL training teaches you, besides how to suffer? It teaches you to turn off the noise in your head, to work the problem methodically, piece by piece. So I opened my laptop and started a new document. Timeline first, when the letters from home started getting weird, when the photos on that USB were dated, when Gregory showed up. I noted every detail I could remember about the house changes too. Missing photos, rearranged furniture, that cologne smell that wasn't mine. The familiar rhythm of logging data helped push down the ache in my chest. This wasn't about feelings anymore. This was about facts, patterns, vulnerabilities, just like planning an op. My phone buzzed. Jake, my old buddy from the repair shop. Hey brother, ran that Vion check like you asked? Your Mustang? Sold 2 weeks ago to a dealer in San Diego. Paperwork looks clean, but... He paused. The signature ain't yours, man. I'd bet my tools on it. My fingers tightened on the phone. That car was more than metal and chrome. I'd rebuilt it from scratch, spent countless nights getting every detail perfect. The thought of someone else driving it. Thanks, Jake. Any chance you can email me those sale documents? Already done. You gonna need backup on this? I thought about it. Not yet. But keep your phone on. After hanging up, I drove to the police station and filed a stolen vehicle report. The desk sergeant recognized me from my military ID and took extra care with the paperwork. Fraud cases like this can get complicated, he warned, especially with domestic situations. I understand, I said, and I did. Probably better than he knew. Back home, I added the police report number to my growing file. The house felt different now, less like a home and more like a tactical environment. Every receipt in the drawers, every email on our shared computer, every bank statement, they weren't memories anymore. They were intel. Somewhere across town, Alyssa was probably laughing with her new man, maybe wearing my dog tags again, thinking she had me figured out. Poor muscle-bound Eric. Too simple to do anything but sign away what she wanted. The thought should have cut deep, should have made me want to punch walls or drink myself numb. Instead, I felt something shift inside. Like that moment in training when you stop fighting the ocean and learn to use its power instead. The pain was still there, but it had crystallized into something harder, clearer, more useful. I pulled up another blank document and titled it, Questions. Who was this other man? Where had Gregory handled cases before? How long had they been planning this? Every question spawned more questions, and each one was a thread to pull, a path to follow. Remember that feeling of stepping into a garage, facing an engine that won't start? You don't get emotional about it. You don't curse the machine. You just start tracing systems, testing connections, finding the fault. That's all this was now, a problem to solve, a system to understand. The old me would have drowned in betrayal and bourbon. But I wasn't that guy anymore. SEAL training had burned away my softer edges, leaving something tempered and precise. Alyssa wanted to break me? She'd have to find me first. And while she was looking, I'd be working, gathering, planning. I opened my laptop's camera and took a photo of Gregory's business card, then logged it in my growing file. The timestamp blinked, 22:47, the first official document in what would become my counteroffensive. No more heartbreak, no more shock. From here on out, it was all precision. I'd learned in training that intel gathering isn't just about finding information, it's about connecting dots others miss. So when I started digging into who this guy was, I wasn't just looking for a name, I was looking for patterns. The USB drive had given me plenty of photos to work with. Most were casual shots, them at restaurants, on his boat, at what looked like resort pools. But one caught my eye, Alyssa wearing my dog tags, sitting at what was clearly an office desk. The nameplate was just visible in the corner, Russell Dade, Regional Operations Manager. Her boss. Of course. You know that moment when a complicated repair suddenly makes sense? When all the little problems line up and point to one big issue? That's how it felt when I pulled up Russell Dade's LinkedIn profile. Regional Ops Manager at Midwest Logistics Solutions, the same company where Alyssa worked as an admin coordinator. The photos showed a lifestyle that seemed way above a middle manager's pay grade. Brand new Boston Whaler in the marina shots, weekend trips to coastal resorts, designer watches, and custom suits. Something wasn't adding up. I remembered how to access Alyssa's work email from when I'd helped her set up her phone. She never changed passwords, always used the same one, our anniversary date. Funny how that worked out. The login still worked. You're making this too easy, I muttered, scrolling through her inbox. There it was, expense reports copied to accounting. Russell had been marking personal charges as business expenses. Dinner for two at Ocean View restaurants, client meetings, weekend stays at luxury resorts, regional conferences. That boat? Partially funded through some creative bookkeeping involving transportation assets. I screenshotted everything, careful to include timestamps and email headers. Each image went into a dedicated folder, organized by date. The total had to be north of 50 grand in misappropriated funds. But something else caught my attention as I reviewed the photos from the USB drive. The metadata told a story Russell probably hadn't considered. Most of these intimate moments? Timestamped between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. on workdays. They weren't just having an affair, they were doing it on company time. I pulled up my timeline document and started cross-referencing. Photo of them at a beach resort, Tuesday, 2:15 p.m. Russell's expense report showed a client lunch meeting that same day. Picture of them on his boat, Thursday, 11:30 a.m. His calendar marked it as supplier negotiations. The whole thing was like a badly maintained engine. Once you spotted one leak, you found them everywhere. Every luxury they'd enjoyed, every moment they'd stolen, left a digital trail. And Russell, thinking he was too smart to get caught, had documented it all himself through corporate accounts. I leaned back in my chair, feeling that familiar calm that comes with having solid intel. The same feeling I got in training when I knew exactly where the target was and how to reach it. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My mind wasn't clouded with betrayal. Alyssa and Russell thought they were playing chess while I was playing checkers. But they'd forgotten something crucial. I'd spent years piecing together complex systems, finding failure points, and fixing what was broken. Only this time, I wasn't fixing anything. I was documenting the breakdown. The screen showed another photo, them laughing on his boat, my dog tags glinting around her neck. The timestamp, Wednesday, 10:45 a.m. Russell's corporate card showed a fuel charge at the marina that same morning, filed under transportation expenses. I created a new folder labeled Financial Documentation and started organizing everything chronologically: expense reports, credit card statements, calendar entries, photos with metadata. Each piece of evidence locked into place like parts in an engine rebuild. Precise, purposeful, perfect. They'd built themselves a house of cards using company money and company time. All I had to do was preserve the evidence of their construction. I looked at the growing folder of screenshots on my desktop. 50 grand in misappropriated funds, dozens of falsified expense reports, countless hours of company time stolen for their affair, all of it documented, time-stamped, and backed up. I shifted my focus to Gregory, Alyssa's shark of a lawyer. Something about his smirk when he served those papers didn't sit right with me. 20 years of diagnosing engine problems had taught me to trust my gut when something felt off. Remember how I mentioned having a memory for details? Well, his business card was still sitting on my desk. Gregory P. Whitman, Esquia. The embossed letters practically shouted money and influence. But every machine has its weak points. You just have to know where to look. I started with basic online searches, the kind anyone could do. State Bar website, legal directories, court records. But it was what wasn't there that caught my attention. Cases that should have been public record were sealed. Judgments that seemed too neat, too quick. The kind of efficiency that makes you wonder what's being hidden under the hood. Time to call in a favor, I muttered, reaching for my phone. Back during my first weeks of SEAL training, I'd befriended an older guy named Martinez, who worked in the JAG office. Recently retired, but still connected. When I explained my situation, he went quiet for a moment. Whitman? Martinez's voice carried a note of recognition. Yeah, I know that name. Give me a day or two. True to his word, Martinez came through. What he sent made my eyebrows rise. Copies of sealed complaints, internal memos, financial records that shouldn't have been accessible. The pattern was clear as day. Whitman had a habit of getting favorable rulings from specific judges. The same names kept appearing: Judge Harrison, Judge Mendoza, Judge Chen. I created a spreadsheet logging every instance, case numbers, dates, ruling patterns. Then I cross-referenced them with Whitman's bank records. Martinez had really come through. Small deposits, always just under reporting thresholds, made to offshore accounts within days of these suspicious rulings. My laptop hummed late into the night as I built the case. The smell of coffee kept me company, reminding me of those long nights in the garage when I wouldn't quit until I solved a particularly tricky diagnostic problem. This was no different, just trading wrenches for keyboards. A text from Alyssa lit up my phone. Hope we can handle this like adults. Be civil about it? I let it sit there unanswered. Civil? Like how she'd been civil when selling my Mustang without permission? Like how her lawyer was being civil with his threats? The irony might have made me laugh if I wasn't so focused. Another piece clicked into place when I found a connection between Whitman and a local real estate developer. Property transfers that coincided with favorable divorce settlements, always involving the same judges. I documented everything, creating a timeline that showed the pattern clear as day. My dossier grew thicker by the hour. Bank statements, case numbers, property records, all of it pointing to a network of under-the-table dealings that would make any ethics board sit up straight. I organized it all with military precision, the way they'd taught us to prepare mission briefs. Alyssa texted again, Greg says you're being difficult. This could all be so simple. Simple. Right. Like how simple it had been for her to throw away 12 years of marriage. Like how simple it had been for her lawyer to threaten me with financial ruin. I added her text to my growing file, evidence of attempted intimidation. Every piece mattered. Martinez called again around midnight. You seeing the pattern? Clear as day, I replied, rubbing my tired eyes. Think it's enough? For the ethics board? More than enough. But remember, timing is everything. He was right. Just like in training, you don't strike until everything's in position. I had the evidence against Russell's embezzlement ready to go. Now I had enough on Whitman to torpedo his career. But the sequence mattered. One domino had to fall before the other. I saved everything to an encrypted drive, then made 3 backup copies. In the garage, I'd always taught my guys to double-check their work. One overlooked detail could bring down an entire engine. Same principle applied here. But instead of an engine, I was taking apart something far more complicated. Looking at my work, I felt that familiar sense of certainty. The same feeling I got in training when I knew every detail of the mission cold. Whitman thought he was dealing with just another desperate husband. He had no idea he was up against someone who'd learned to think like a SEAL. The next morning, I dragged myself to the local diner where I'd been meeting Tom, my neighbor, for our weekly coffee. The place smelled like bacon and decades-old coffee stains, reminding me of those early mornings at the garage when I'd grab breakfast before opening up shop. Tom was already there, nursing his usual black coffee. At 72, with steel gray hair and perfect posture, you could still spot the Marine in him from a mile away. He'd been watching this whole mess unfold from his front porch, offering quiet support without pushing. You look like hell, son, he said as I slid into the booth. I slumped deliberately, letting my shoulders sag. Feel like it too. The waitress brought my usual, eggs over easy, hash browns extra crispy. I pushed the food around my plate, playing the part. Maybe, I sighed, making sure to sound defeated. Maybe I should just walk away. Sign whatever they want. Tom's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. He set it down slowly, fixing me with that drill instructor stare I'd seen before. Now you listen here, he said, voice low and steady. I've watched you drag yourself home from training looking half dead. Seen you push through when most men would have quit. You didn't go through SEAL hell just to fold here. I nodded weakly, but inside I was counting down. 19 days until my official SEAL induction. Everything had to land just right. Tell you what, Tom continued, reaching for his wallet. He pulled out a worn business card. Got an old friend, Patricia. Best damn paralegal in 3 counties. She might be able to help. Thanks, I mumbled, pocketing the card. What Tom didn't know was that Patricia had already pulled some key records for me 2 days ago. Her research had filled in the last gaps in Whitman's paper trail. Look at me, Eric. Tom's voice carried that command presence that never really leaves a Marine. Whatever you're thinking, and I know you're thinking something, just remember, Marines plan, SEALs execute. I let a tiny smile slip, my first genuine reaction of the morning. Tom caught it and nodded slightly. He knew I wasn't broken, he just couldn't see how far ahead I'd planned. Back home, I spent the afternoon finalizing both dossiers. Russell's embezzlement case was airtight. Every company credit card charge matched to hotel bookings, boat payments, even jewelry store receipts. The timeline perfectly aligned with their affair. Whitman's file was even more damning. Patricia's records had revealed a pattern of suspicious property transfers through shell companies, all linking back to those 3 judges. Every ruling, every payment, every connection, documented and cross-referenced. I printed 3 copies of each file, securing them in separate locations. The originals went into a safety deposit box under my brother's name. The clock on my laptop showed 7:43 p.m. In exactly 19 days, I'd raise my right hand and become an active duty SEAL. After that, any attempt to mess with my finances would trigger automatic military investigations. My phone buzzed. Another text from Alyssa. Greg says time's running out. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I actually smiled at that one. Time was running out all right, just not the way they thought. Everything was in position. The evidence, the timing, the backup plans. Now it was just about waiting for the right moment. I powered down my laptop and headed to the garage. The empty space where my Mustang should have been still made my jaw clench. But that was okay. I'd get her back. The vehicle registration papers I'd found proved they'd forged my signature. One more card to play when the time came. The next morning, I called Whitman's office and left a message with his secretary. My voice was carefully calibrated to sound resigned, defeated. Tell him I'm ready to discuss terms. Let them think they'd won. Let them believe they'd broken me. In SEAL training, they taught us that sometimes the best position is the one your enemy doesn't think is a position at all. 19 days. Just 19 more days of playing broken. 2 weeks crawled by like molasses in January. I kept up the defeated act. Shoulders slumped at the grocery store. Quiet nods when neighbors asked how I was holding up. Even let my lawn get a little ragged, something the old Eric would never have done. The whole time, my phone stayed quiet. No texts from Alyssa, no smug calls from Whitman. They thought they had me right where they wanted me. Then yesterday morning, my cell lit up with a Navy number. I stepped outside, morning dew soaking my boots, and took the call. Petty Officer Maddox. The voice was crisp, official. This is Commander Reynolds' office. Your induction ceremony is confirmed for next Friday at 0900. Do you copy? My spine straightened automatically. Copy that, ma'am. Friday at 0900. Congratulations, sailor. Make us proud. I stood there after hanging up, watching the sun climb over the neighbor's roof. The same sun that had beaten down on me during Hell Week, that had risen and set while I pushed through pain that should have broken me. Now it was witnessing another kind of dawn. Back inside, I powered up my laptop one last time. The file titled Russell Dade Financial was a masterpiece of documentation. Every credit card statement, every hotel booking, every penny of company money he'd spent wooing my wife. The timestamps were particularly damning. Lunch meetings that stretched to 3 hours, workplace training sessions that happened in beach resorts. All of it paid for with the company card. The second file, Whitman Ethics, was even better. Patricia's research had been worth every penny. The pattern was clear as day. Cases mysteriously reassigned to specific judges, property transfers through shell companies, rulings that defied precedent, all connected by a web of payments and favors that any ethics board would salivate over. Remember that old auto shop smell? Oil, rubber, hot metal? When you work with engines long enough, you learn to diagnose problems by scent. This situation had that same kind of stink to it. The difference was, this time I had more than just my nose to go on. I hit print and watched the pages stack up. Clean, professional, devastating. Each sheet another nail in their coffins. While the printer hummed, I pulled out 2 sheets of my best stationery, the kind I'd bought years ago for thank you notes and never used. The first letter was simple. To the Human Resources Department and Board of Directors, attached please find documentation regarding the misuse of company funds by Regional Operations Manager Russell Dade. All evidence has been independently verified. I trust you will handle this matter appropriately. Respectfully, Eric Maddox. The second followed the same template, but addressed to the State Bar Ethics Committee. Both letters were short, professional, and completely nuclear. I slipped each packet into heavy legal envelopes, the kind that mean business, sealed them carefully, ran my thumb along the edges to make sure they were perfect. Then I set them beside my keys on the kitchen counter, right where I'd see them first thing in the morning. Tomorrow was Tuesday. Our court date was set for Thursday. The timing couldn't have been better if I'd planned it myself, which, of course, I had. Walking through the house that night, checking locks like always, I thought about Alyssa, about Russell wearing my dog tags in those photos, about Whitman's smug grin when he served me the papers. They'd all underestimated me, thought I was just another grease monkey who got lucky with a military contract. But that's the thing about being underestimated. It gives you room to work, room to plan, room to set up the kind of takedown they'll never see coming. I hit the lights in my home office, now cleared of all evidence. The envelopes gleamed faintly in the darkness of the kitchen, waiting for morning. In less than 72 hours, their whole world would implode, and I wouldn't have to throw a single punch. They won't see it coming, I whispered to the quiet house. Wednesday morning came clear and cold, the kind of autumn day that reminds you winter's coming, ready or not. I sat in my truck outside the post office at 7:45 a.m., both envelopes on the passenger seat. The one for Russell's company was marked Urgent Human Resources Department in clean block letters. My hands didn't shake as I walked inside. 15 years of precision mechanical work teaches you steady fingers, no matter what's at stake. I paid for priority overnight delivery and watched the clerk stamp it, checking the tracking number twice. By 8 a.m., justice was in motion. You know that feeling when you've just finished a perfect engine rebuild? When everything's torqued exactly right, all the clearances are dead on, and you just know it'll purr? That's how I felt walking back to my truck. Every component was aligned. All I had to do was wait. I drove to the strip mall across from Russell's office building, parked where I could see the main entrance but stay hidden behind a delivery van. The coffee in my thermos was still hot, the same brand I'd kept in my shop, the smell bringing back memories of early mornings bent over carburetors. My phone buzzed at 10:17 a.m., a shipping notification. The package had been delivered and signed for. I took another sip of coffee and settled in. The first sign came around 11:30, two men in suits walking quickly through the front doors, not Russell's usual crowd. Behind them, a woman in a blazer clutching a tablet. Had to be HR. They disappeared inside and the waiting game continued. At 11:45, a police cruiser pulled up. Then another. My pulse didn't even quicken. This was exactly how I'd mapped it out, playing through the scenario during those long nights alone in my house. The cops positioned themselves casually near the entrance, talking between themselves, looking like they had all day. Have you ever watched a trap you've set work exactly as planned? It's like seeing a complex diagnostic test confirm what you already knew was wrong with an engine, satisfying in the deepest way possible. 12:10 p.m. Movement at the doors. Russell came out first, flanked by the suits. His designer polo wasn't doing him any favors now. The officers stepped forward, efficient and professional. Even from across the parking lot, I could see the color drain from Russell's face as they read him his rights, his hands trembling as they cuffed him. The woman with the tablet stood in the doorway, phone to her ear, probably already damage controlling to corporate. Russell's head swiveled left and right, like he was looking for someone to save him. But there was no one. Just like there had been no one for me when I came home to an empty house and a USB drive full of betrayal. They led him to the cruiser. He didn't resist. Guys like Russell never do. They talk tough in offices and restaurants, wearing other men's dog tags and spending other people's money. But when real consequences show up, they fold. I waited until they drove away, then pulled out my laptop. Time for phase 2. The file on Whitman was already formatted, with supporting documents linked and annotated. I'd created 3 separate emails the night before, one to the State Ethics Board, one each to 2 oversight committees known for their aggressive pursuit of corruption. My finger hovered over send for just a moment. Not from doubt, from savoring. Like that half-second pause before starting up an engine you've just rebuilt. Click, click, click. 3 emails, 3 grenades launched into Whitman's carefully constructed world. By morning, his phone would be ringing with questions he couldn't answer about judges he shouldn't know and money that shouldn't exist. I drove home as the sun was setting, stopped to pick up a pizza from the place Alyssa used to hate. Eaten alone at my kitchen table, it tasted better than any meal I'd had in months. That night, I stretched out on my bed, in my house, that I'd earned with honest work and sweat. No guilt, no rage. Just the deep, quiet satisfaction of knowing that tomorrow, in court, everything would be different. For the first time since finding those photos, I slept straight through until morning. No dreams, no waking up in cold sweats. Just rest. The kind of rest you earn when you know you've done things right. I arrived at the courthouse 40 minutes early. Old habit from my mechanic days. Better to wait than make others wait. The marble hallway echoed with my footsteps, still wearing my steel-toed boots. Some things you don't leave behind. A young clerk directed me to courtroom C, her eyes lingering on my military haircut. Inside, morning light streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across empty wooden benches. I chose a spot 3 rows back, center, perfect sight lines to all corners. Another habit I'd picked up in training. Remember sitting in your high school cafeteria, watching some kid realize they'd forgotten their lunch money? That same mix of panic and dread played across Whitman's face when he walked in at 8:52. His usually pristine suit looked slept in, tie slightly askew. He kept checking his phone, probably watching his career implode in real time as those ethics board emails made their rounds. Alyssa breezed in 2 minutes before 9, wearing the same confident smile she'd had when serving me divorce papers. But something was off. Her eyes darted around the room, probably looking for Russell. Good luck with that, I thought. He was probably still trying to explain to corporate investigators why company credit cards paid for weekend getaways. The bailiff called us to order. Judge Harrison entered. Older woman, sharp eyes behind reading glasses. She'd been on the bench 20 years. I'd done my homework there, too. Maddox versus Maddox, she announced, shuffling papers. I understand the petitioner is seeking alimony and claims against military benefits? She peered at Whitman over those glasses. Whitman stood, tugging at his collar. Your Honor, we'd like to request a continuance. There have been some developments. Denied. Judge Harrison cut him off. Mr. Maddox? She turned to me. Your response to these claims? I rose slowly, calm as still water. The manila folder in my hands contained months of careful work. Your Honor, I have several items for the court's consideration. The sound of my boots on the hardwood felt like a countdown. I approached the bench and handed over my documentation. Original purchase receipts for everything Alyssa claimed was joint property. Military service records proving my signing bonus was earned before marriage. And finally, a copy of the ethics investigation notice regarding Whitman's previous cases. Additionally, I continued, my voice steady, Mr. Russell Dade, who I understand was planning to testify regarding my wife's financial needs, is currently unavailable due to an ongoing corporate fraud investigation. Alyssa's sharp intake of breath cut through the silence. From the corner of my eye, I saw her perfectly manicured hands grip the table edge. Judge Harrison took her time, reading each document carefully. The only sound was Whitman's ragged breathing and the soft rustle of papers. Finally, she looked up. Mr. Whitman, are you aware you're named in an ethics investigation? He stammered something about misunderstandings and pending explanations. And Mrs. Maddox, the judge continued, your primary witness is under investigation for embezzlement. The same witness who, according to these time-stamped photos, was engaging in an affair with you during company hours. Alyssa's jaw tightened so hard I could almost hear teeth crack. The confidence drained from her face like air from a punctured tire. This court, Judge Harrison declared, finds no basis for alimony. The petitioner's claim to military benefits is denied. All property purchased prior to marriage returns to its original owner. She paused, studying the ethics complaint. Furthermore, I'm forwarding these materials to the district attorney's office for review. The gavel crack echoed like a starting gun. Whitman practically ran from the courtroom, phone already at his ear. Alyssa sat frozen, staring straight ahead as reality crashed down around her. I gathered my papers quietly, methodically, the way I used to pack up my tools after finishing a complicated repair. When I turned to leave, Alyssa finally found her voice. Eric, she started. I paused, not looking back. You wanted a real man, I said softly. You got one. The morning sun felt warmer as I walked out of the courthouse. My phone buzzed, a message confirming my official SEAL induction ceremony tomorrow. Perfect timing. In my truck's side mirror, I caught a glimpse of Alyssa standing alone on the courthouse steps, her carefully planned future evaporating like morning dew. The gavel's echo had barely faded when Alyssa shot up from her chair, knocking it backward. Her heels clicked like angry punctuation marks as she stormed toward the double doors, shoulder-checking a bailiff on her way out. The perfect mask she'd worn all these months had finally cracked, showing the fury beneath. Through the courthouse windows, I watched her pace the steps outside, jabbing at her phone, probably trying to reach Russell, who was busy explaining to corporate investigators why company cards paid for weekend getaways at the Four Seasons. You know that feeling when you finally get a stubborn engine part to slide into place? This was better. Whitman still sat at the defense table, loose papers scattered like autumn leaves. His $1,000 suit couldn't hide the sweat stains spreading under his arms. As I walked past, he wouldn't meet my eyes. The ethics board would keep him busy for months. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting consequences do their work. Outside, the late morning sun felt different somehow, cleaner, brighter. Tom stood by his pickup, arms crossed, grinning like he'd just won a bet. The old Marine had been my sounding board through all this, never doubting my strategy even when I played the broken man. "Done?" he asked simply. I nodded. "Done." "DMV's open till 4, he said, checking his watch. "Want company?" I thought about it, but shook my head. This one I need to do solo. The DMV was exactly as I remembered. Fluorescent lights, tired faces, and the smell of old paperwork. But today, even that felt right. I took my number and waited, watching the red digital display tick forward. An hour later, I handed over my documentation proving the Mustang's fraudulent sale. The clerk, bless her, actually smiled as she processed the paperwork. "Title's yours again," she said, sliding the forms across the counter. "Give 'em hell." The mechanic's shop sat on the edge of town, all rust-streaked concrete and oil stains. Mike Chen's Auto Service. I'd actually worked with Mike years back, before he opened his own place. He was outside when I pulled up, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "Eric?" He squinted, then his eyes went wide. "Man, if I'd known that Mustang was yours." I held up a hand. "Just here for the car, Mike." He nodded quickly. Yeah, she never even made the first payment. Car's still technically mine on paper." He disappeared into the office, came back with a set of familiar keys. "She's around back. Been keeping her covered." The shape under the tarp was exactly as I remembered. My hands didn't shake as I pulled the cover back, but my chest got tight. There she was, my '69 Fastback, Acapulco blue. The paint still gleamed like deep water. I'd rebuilt this engine twice, replaced every bushing and bearing by hand. The leather seats still showed the worn spot on the driver's side where I'd spent countless hours. You ever notice how certain smells can take you right back? When I opened that door, it was like stepping through time. Motor oil, old leather, and just a hint of the pine air freshener I always hung from the mirror. For a second, I was 25 again, working late nights to afford the rebuild parts, dreaming of something bigger than a small-town garage. Mike cleared his throat. "She's all yours, man. No paperwork needed with that court order." I slid behind the wheel, wrapped my hands around the steering wheel. The key slipped into the ignition like coming home. One turn, and that 302 Windsor V8 rumbled to life, steady as a heartbeat. "Thanks, Mike," I said through the open window. He waved as I backed out. "Take care of her." The road opened up ahead of me, clean and empty. I didn't gun it or peel out, just let her cruise, feeling the familiar vibration through the floorboards. In the rearview, I caught a glimpse of my face. I looked different than the last time I'd driven this car. Harder around the eyes maybe, but calmer too. This wasn't about winning anymore. Hell, it wasn't even about revenge. Sitting there, listening to that engine purr, I finally understood what I'd really gotten back. My own truth. Every nut and bolt in this car had a purpose, every part working together exactly as designed. No lies, no games, no pretense, just pure mechanical honesty. I turned onto the coastal highway, shifted into fourth, and let the ocean breeze roll through the open windows. The future stretched out like an empty road, and for the first time in months, I felt nothing but clear. 6 weeks after the courthouse, I sat on my new deck, watching the sun climb over the Pacific. The coffee was hot, black as engine oil, and the morning breeze carried that perfect mix of salt and seaweed that meant the tide was coming in. My little rental house wasn't much, just a weathered 2-bedroom about a mile from base. But it had good bones and an ocean view. Kind of like me, I guess. You know that feeling when you finally put down a heavy weight you've been carrying? That's what those morning coffees felt like. My shoulders had lost that concrete tension, and my jaw didn't ache from grinding my teeth anymore. The only sound was waves breaking and seabirds arguing over breakfast. Inside, my SEAL qualification medal caught the early light from its shadow box on the living room wall. Some guys mount theirs with dramatic photos or their dress uniforms, but I kept it simple. Just the medal, the citation, and a small brass plate with the date. Below it hung my old shop keys on a handmade oak plaque, reminder of where I started. The journey between those two pieces of metal measured more than just years. The local paper had run a small story about Russell's arrest. Corporate fraud, misappropriation of funds, breach of contract, the works. His company's board wasn't playing around. Last I heard, he was looking at serious time, trying to cut some kind of deal. The fancy boat got seized, along with most of his assets. Funny how karma works sometimes. Alyssa's name never came up in the coverage, but word gets around in small towns. She'd moved away within weeks, deleted all her social media. Sometimes silence says more than headlines ever could. Her lawyer caught it worse. The ethics board investigation sparked a full review of his practice. His license got suspended pending the outcome. 3 other clients came forward with similar stories about under-the-table dealings. The dominoes just kept falling. Me? I focused on rebuilding, same way I used to approach engine work. Start with the foundation, check every component, replace what's worn out, strengthen what remains. My new routine was simple: morning PT, duty hours at base, evenings in the garage with the Mustang. I'd stripped her down to bare metal, working through every system methodically. The 302 Windsor got a complete overhaul. New rings, bearings, valve job, the works. Paint went back to factory spec Acapulco blue, deep enough to swim in. The keys sat on the deck table beside my coffee, catching that golden morning light. They weren't just car keys anymore. They were proof that precision beats power every time. Strategy outlasts rage. The right plan, executed with patience, hits harder than any punch. Through my open garage door, I could see the Mustang's fresh paint gleaming. The morning sun lit her up like polished sapphire. Everything that made her special was internal: the balanced rotating assembly, the perfectly adjusted valves, the precise clearances you'd never see from outside. Just like the best revenge, invisible until it's too late. A squadron of pelicans cruised past, riding the thermals up from the beach. Their formation reminded me of something they'd drilled into us during SEAL training. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Rush the plan, you trip yourself up. Stay methodical, you hit harder. Looking back, that's exactly how it played out. They expected emotional outbursts, desperate moves. Instead, they got cold precision. My coffee had cooled to drinking temperature. I took a long sip, letting the quiet settle around me. The metal inside caught another flash of sunlight, like a wink from an old friend. Below it, those shop keys hung silent and steady, marking where this whole story started. Between them stretched a path I never could have planned, but wouldn't change if I could. She'd wanted my silence when she served those papers, expected me to crumble, take the hit, maybe even beg. Instead, I gave her my strategy: calculated, mechanical, and absolutely precise. Just like rebuilding an engine, every action has a reaction, every torque spec matters, and in the end, truth always surfaces. The tide was coming in strong now, pushing white foam up the beach. I finished my coffee and stood, feeling that easy strength in my shoulders, the kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you're made of. Time to hit the water for morning PT. The Mustang's keys clinked softly against the deck table as I gathered them up, music to a mechanic's ears. I believe stories like this find us for a reason. If this one touched you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day, and tomorrow's might be the one your heart's been waiting for.